allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, we ask that you be with us tonight to help us to do our business for the good and the welfare of the people. In your name we pray. Amen.
He usually kind of stands up here and runs through it, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll just approve the approval of the agenda will be the first item here.
Yep.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Citizens' comments, Mr. Chair. If you want to go ahead and go through the rules, or you can call any of them up.
All right, so here in a minute we'll open citizens' comments. Each citizen is allowed 3 minutes. Each guest is welcome to comment, but they must state their first, last name, and their address. And this is for an item that is not already on the scheduled hearing for the agenda this evening. We'll get to those when we get to those steps. So we'll open the citizens' comments. All right, we'll close the citizens' comments. The next step then will be approval of the minutes from the February 10th planning meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes of February 10, 2025.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Now it's your turn.
All right, thank you, Honorable Chairman, and this will be the Board of Zoning Appeals here. Here to talk about the rezoning for the development, the villas at PRC. It's case number zone 25-1. We do have an agent for the applicant here, Mr. Denicky with MKDC. He's one of the engineers who is working on this on behalf of the applicant. So, the engineering firm submitted the application on behalf of the developer to rezone around 45 acres. It's in the northeast corner of 183rd and Maple. Interested in rezoning it from its current R1 single family to R4 high density residential. It would allow the developer to build twin homes, triplexes, and quadplexes for an independent senior living community. The developers completed independent senior living projects with the villas at the Hamptons in West Wichita, as well as the villas at Prestwick and Bel Air. I believe this is going to be a very similar product to those two projects that are currently in existence. Initial discussion with the development group, they had mentioned to us that they may do single-family lots right off of 183rd. I think this had something to do with the floodplain and how that could maybe work a little bit better with them not having to modify the floodplain if they built single-family on that west side. So, as you guys know, the golden rules, you've heard it many times. There's 17 of them, I want to say. And all of those were included in your agenda packet with all the responses. The City Council would consider ratifying whatever decision you guys make tonight during their March 17th City Council meeting. Here is a couple of snapshots from the product that they have delivered at the villas at the Hamptons, as well as the villas at the Prestwick. Felt like it was necessary to share some of that with you guys so you have an understanding of what they're proposing with this development. So I think you have a combination actually of the two different neighborhoods there. You can see at the top and then also on the top left and the bottom left there some external views. I actually think the top one is the one in Bel Air and the bottom one is the one in West Wichita, the Hamptons. That top right photo is the interior of the clubhouse that they have. Again, these are independent senior living facilities, so they bring with them some amenities and things of that nature for the seniors to enjoy. And then the bottom right is just a look at some of the interior finishes, so you guys can see again, what the quality of the finishes are in the interior of these potential properties. One of the things that we're going to work to do a little bit more of as we bring these cases to you guys is have a a greater discussion about the public infrastructure impacts. So as we look at this one, a couple things worth mentioning. So the Elk Ridge Lift Station would receive the sewer from this development, and they would need to improve and upsize the lift station, and that cost would be borne by the developer of the villas, which they understand that. These are things we've shared with them. The cost would be fully assessed to the villas and not Elk Ridge or the city at large. I want to make sure that I underscore that statement. So the villas would be also covering 85% of the cost for a 12-inch water main extension / looping project that would not be required but for the development. There's another adjacent development that would cover that other 15%. So from a city infrastructure perspective, one of the value adds of this project is that we're able to check off a $500,000 water main / looping project that we would otherwise be paying for with all the other folks that live here. So we're pretty excited about the opportunity that this project brings to kind of close that gap there in our system on the north side of town. Also, we're going to be requesting that the developer pave 183rd from Maple to the east entrance of Elk Ridge there, and then there'll be an entryway to their development as well, and pathways on both the south and west side of the right-of-way that runs along this property. For platting, we're going to require them to split the lots up front. I believe they intend on holding this, not selling it. However, if years down the road they did sell it, the lots already being split during the platting process would make it so specials would not have to be respread, which of course takes time and money to do. So this is something that we're going to be requiring more of as we look at more than single family development.
Correct.
Yes.
On the previous slide, the 15% being assessed to the adjacent development, what's the rationale for?
So they used I want to say it was either lot count or maybe something to do with square footage, one of the two, but it's basically a pro rata share between the villas and then the Willows Ridge development, which is about 33 lots. So because the Willows Ridge is so much smaller, that's why they're only paying 15%, whereas this development would cover 85. So, and that's specifically talking about this water looping project that wouldn't be necessary but for the development going on in that area. So, this is one of the projects that was identified in our Goddard Water Master Plan. So creates an opportunity to finance that through special assessments instead of the citizens at large having to pay for that looping project.
Thank you.
Of course. Here's a look at the location. Usually I look at this screen, so I'm like back and forth here tonight. You can see here's the aerial of this 45-ish acres. This is 183rd Street running north and south. Here's Maple here. Here's where that Willows development would be. Over here is a look at the paving requirements that we would require outside the development. The entrance here, so you can see one of the value adds is that this is currently a gravel road. Sedgwick County Fire is going to require 2 points of ingress and egress here. So, and we see with the city's growth plans that it's possible that there could be further development up here. So it makes sense to begin on that public infrastructure now, so we're not, the citizens at large aren't picking up that tab later. I wanted to show you the location of this water main extension. Ignore this little thought bubble here. We told the engineers that, we're not going to put a water tower there, but it didn't quite make it out of the presentation. But the 12-inch water line that they're going to be picking up 85% of, it's this little stretch right here. So here's 183rd Street, here's Maple, here's the Bridger at Maple development right here. So that water main currently dead ends as it comes out of, I think, the Seasons development there. So we'll be requiring a 12-inch main extension that'll loop this main to that main. That'll ensure adequate fire flows, that'll ensure more than adequate pressure, and it'll make it so as we continue to develop that we'll be able to serve water to the broader community up in that direction. Alright, so here are the golden rules. These were included in your agenda packet. Hopefully you guys read through those thoroughly. I'm required to present them to you, but that does not mean I have to read them, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spend about 5 seconds on each slide, and then I'm going to advance them. If there's anything out of the golden rules that you guys want to discuss or unpack further, I'd encourage you to do that. we started including this slide, I want to say within the last few city council meetings, it kind of addresses some of the frequently asked questions or concerns that we hear from our citizens or stakeholders that relates to these zoning amendments. As always, we have a small publication cost notifying the broader community about this evening's public hearing, and then also to publish the ordinance should City Council ratify your decision. The legal team has approved this to its current form. With that, Mr. Chair, if you want, you can go ahead and open the public hearing. It doesn't require a second or a vote. You can merely open it, and then when all the comments have been received, you can close it. As you know, with public comment, it's one-way dialogue from the stakeholders to you guys, not a two-way dialogue. If that's something that we would like to do, we would be glad to set up time with any of the concerned citizens during business hours. So with that, I'll step aside.
We'll open the public hearing at this time. Remember to state your first and last name and your address. You can raise it up. No worries.
I just didn't want to knock it over there. Well, good evening. Paul Jonas, 318 North 183rd Street, Goddard. I'm the resident just north of the horse farm. Okay. And I believe that against this proposed RSO voting, first let me qualify this. My comments are based on a little bit of information I have about this project. The only thing that I could get from the website and from staff, and there wasn't much posted. I went to the Sedgwick County website and looked at all of this, and so there's just not a lot of information, but I do have a lot of information and concerns that I hope we can start thinking about. When I got the notice for the R4, when I looked, the last published minutes we had was R2. And there wasn't any real explanation why it went from an R2 to an R4. So again, I'm not sure why there was a downgrade since there wasn't any information or discussion about that. However, with that said, I'm just really concerned about any building on or near the creek or in the floodplain that are unknown to us at this point in time. I'd be concerned about any alteration to a natural waterway as the effects are unknown. Concerned about the additional traffic on 183rd, because it's current, it won't support that traffic. And I'm also concerned with the additional taxes that will be imposed on us to fix the resulting effects of those downstream of this development. Yes, the creek is located on my property, and when it floods heavily, it floods. Okay. Therefore, the development south of us, especially when you consider additional pasture land that's converted to hardscape, it's going to undoubtedly apply more pressure to the creek and to the floodplain. To be clear, I'm not concerned that the developer is going to do anything wrong and their property be perfectly compliant. I'd be worried about the additional fill and raising the elevation to make it compliant, and also deeply concerned that there's no plan analysis, funding, or desire to address the negative effects of us downstream. I'd also be concerned with any alteration in the natural floodway. If the creek is dammed for aesthetics, then all the trees, vegetation, and wildlife for miles that rely on the creek for their existence will be severely affected. Just look at Google Maps. You can trace the creek by the trees that you see in the picture. Likewise, I'm also concerned that increased drainage will have a negative impact downpour. Last year, I measured 4.5 feet of flooding above the creek level. Unscientific, just a tape measure and measuring the bathtub stain of all the debris on the trees. Okay, it just gets higher and higher. And if the creek floodplain were to be altered, we need the requisite state and federal studies to understand the outcome. And it may already need updating. Okay. Since the addition of the Elk Ridge development to the west, we have seen increased flooding on 183rd Street. Here again, I'm not implying anybody in Elk Ridge did anything wrong, there's any problem, but there is an impact. Not only does the creek overflow at 183rd culvert, but there are now 3 different additional areas where it floods from the west. They put up those little reflective posts, but most of those get washed away when there's a flood because it just takes everything with it. It's so bad that the water now backs up to 2nd Street, then runs east from 183rd down across my property. And I really have Niagara Falls over my retaining walls now that I haven't had before. So I'm concerned that additional drainage and the speed and volume of the water creep and floodway. In the end, the proposal should study the additional drainage, especially when it leaves the proposed area, and where it goes and the impact of those downstream. My nightmare is that I'll see a great big culvert right at the edge of the property line dumping water on my property. I'm also very concerned about the additional taxes that would be imposed to remedy the negative impacts in the development. When I first came here in 2007, our yearly property taxes were $3,200 a year. This year I paid over $9,700 and just received a notice that went up another 11% for doing nothing. We moved out here to build our forever home, invested to make it ours, our own, and the reality is that retirement may be forced to move because high taxes when we're on fixed income or the increased flood insurance will rise significantly. I'm also concerned with additional water wells to do the groundwater, which has decreased over the years. And we need to just keep an eye on that. I'm especially concerned because I heat and cool with water. Okay, so I'm concerned that there really wasn't anything about the R2 and R4, why we had to do it, or what does that do. When we moved here, we understood that there would be a significant amount of our property in what we could not develop. Okay, we still have to pay taxes on it. But the restrictions detailed in our plat are quite definitive. No building shall be constructed or replaced, or shall any fill, change, or grade, creation of any channel or other work, etc., etc. You may also notice there's no easements or roads through that floodplain. And it's also, I'm also talking, I said, the floodplain 183rd to 179th Street, all the houses we have. We chose this location to become good stewards of the environment, along with our neighbors along 179th and 183rd that back up to the floodway. We learned to live with the deer, the foxes, the coyote, raccoons, geese, and all the other residents that are there with us as well. Okay. The beauty of our neighborhood is we all have a vested interest and responsibility to the rest of the community to protect the creek and the floodway. We all knew this when we chose and buy the property. It's in agreement, so it's changed. One would look at the creek and say it's not straight, curves a lot of wasted space. Right? I'm really amazed how nature has perfected this as it's curved and switchbacks, increase the water, the amount of water it can hold, and slow down the flood to manage erosion. The natural flows allows the water to absorb in the ground where it can renewish our creek and replenish the groundwater. Another thing is when we first moved here, we could take walks along 183rd.
You need to wrap it up here.
I will do that today. In conclusion, I'm just trying to say is rezoning most importantly the plan to approve. Perhaps we could work together on this to come up with a meaningful solution. I did like the idea of the R1 along the road because that's primarily where the floodplain is today. It would have the minimal impact to the environment and to the floodway. Lastly, I should be concerned because my last home I was flooded out of it. I had the same type of discussion with the planning commission. Even had it in writing, they have a flood plan that was going to keep us from doing that. But what I found out was unenforceable, and the developer knew that, and so all the promises he made to the neighborhood were invalid and non-enforceable. So when it rained, we had about 4 foot of swampland behind the house. And I just don't want to be in a place where, after all of our work and stuff, that I'm going to have to move because of flooding and taxes. I mean, we moved here, we love the community and our friends, and just don't want to be flooded and taxed out of our home. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? You just want to take it here. Good. Come on up.
Put it back down, I'm sure. Good evening, Joey Denicky, MKC agent on behalf of applicant. Hopefully I can kind of answer some of these questions. However, I can't speak too much, unfortunately, to some of the flooding questions. This is the initial stage that we're at right now, the zoning. We are proposing a plat. We are working on it now. our drainage engineer. She's quite aware of some of the limitations out there with the floodplain. We definitely will take that into account, and we will follow any kind of regulatory floodways or any kind of permitting. However, I do know that we are intentionally going to be staying out of the floodplain. I think someone spoke to this earlier, but just the amount of money that it would take to kind of fill in the floodplain is just not worth it at all. It's kind of a headache. So, as mentioned, we are proposing this R4 zoning. However, we actually just need R2, but after further discussion with Micah, we kind of understood that some of the bulk regulations kind of limited us. Again, this type of development, it's a retirement type development. So the way it works is, you know, as you saw in those pictures, they're nice, you know, communities. So the owners move in there, but they don't want to take care of a lot of lot. So the HOA actually takes care of the yard, landscaping, things like that. So it's a really good deal for them. But with that, we're not needing a large lot. So some of those bulk regulations of the size of the lot, I think there's limitations on as far as the unit size, things like that. So Micah mentioned that we may need to go through a conditional use, but he thought it'd be cleaner to actually just go for an R4 because setbacks, the rear setback, I think we're needing a little bit less than 20 feet. And then, let's see, so I have some notes here. So yeah, with that, so primarily we're needing that R2. It's a single family attached. We are proposing 2 units attached. We do want the flexibility if we want to go to the triplex, but it's not planned at this time. The western edge, we are proposing 2 single family residential units there, and you'll see that with the next submittal with the plat. But it's just, it wasn't, we weren't able to fit some of those duplex units along that side. So the single family is definitely the best use there. So I can't really speak to some of the conversations that's been had with, you know, extending the street up at this time. I know they've been in a lot of conversation. The developer talked about cost sharing and things like that, but I know as it matures with the plating, we'll be able to kind of answer any other questions on that. So with that, I stand for any other questions you may have.
Would it be possible, and just thinking of options here, to zone it as an R2 and maybe get a variance on setbacks? Right?
Yeah, possibly so. There is also some uncertainty with the senior type living units. The way the R2 is structured is we'd have to go through some sort of conditional use on that as well. Again, R2 even speaks towards you'd have to go through a conditional use for a clubhouse amenity, which didn't make much sense, and Micah acknowledged that as well. And again, that's where he kind of directed us that R4 would probably be a little bit easier of a process. But and I don't, you know, we can certainly, we've discussed, you know, if there's any kind of protective overlay, if we needed to kind of you know, look at as far as, you know, limiting to these types of uses, and we're open to that. I'm not quite sure if Goddard has that type of system in place with the protective overlay.
So staff's perspective on that, because this is time and money that we're having to spend too. If that were a great concern to you that we authorized R4 and then the city council ratified that they were going to maybe go in and do a higher density use than what you were told they would do, to maybe mitigate that, what I would say, low potential outcome based on the collaboration we've had with this developer before. One of the things you could consider doing is the protective covenant, which we just do as a part of the plat approval, and then that's filed with the county. You guys have seen that more often when we talk about, I hate to use the word ratio, but if that were a concern, that would be another way to maybe mitigate the concern. That wouldn't require a bunch more staff time to have to process a variance and a conditional use and those types of things. So just to give you some options to allay the potential concern.
And you did say that's at the plating point, right?
Yeah, and then it would just be filed with the plat.
Is their plan to develop the entire 45 acres now? Is there going to be a half now and a half later that could
It'll-
become apartments or something?
No, it's gonna be a phased development, but we're platting it all now.
Okay, so you have all the lot lines
Exactly,
and
yeah.
everything will be.
Yep,
Complete.
that's the plan, so.
Okay.
And as of now, we're primarily looking at the two-family attached units only. However, as market changes, if we needed to slide a lot to have a triplex, we could certainly do so. But again, it's gonna be the villa style product. That's what the developer is going after, and it's not gonna be anything other than the retirement villas there, so.
And there's planned retention or detention on that property for this?
Yes, they're looking into it. Again, I unfortunately can't speak to too much of that.
Sure.
We're just designing it now.
Sure.
As far as sizes of culverts, things like that, I'm uncertain, but when we get back here in another month with Planning Commission, we'll be able to kind of answer any of those other questions, so.
Mr. Dean.
Thank you.
Any other citizen comments here before we close that? Our public hearing, I guess we'll close the public hearing then. Now it's ours now. Any discussion?
Yeah. I mean, so somewhere in these golden rules that it mentions, R4 currently accounts for almost 78 acres in the city of Goddard.
2.4%.
Yeah, 2.4%. So this is adding potentially 45 additional acres, so that's about 150% jump in what we had or what we potentially have in the future. Over the last year, there's been a lot of there are several zonings, and there's been several other times when duplexes developments have been up for consideration, and I think we've approved them all. But right towards the end of last year, you're started hearing some pushback from the citizens, pushback from the city council. I think it ended up not coming to anything official, but there was a lot against more duplexes, and I think personally, I'm a big fan as anybody as far as growing Goddard, but also looking at where the duplexes are at. I mean, right next to this development is another huge, probably even bigger duplex development. It's not necessarily part of Goddard, but right next to the to the high school, there's another duplex development. I think there's another one down the road. You know, I was excited when I heard, I think his name's Marty Schellenberg, bought that land. He's the guy who developed Harper Creek, and personally I was hoping he was going to do something like that there. And I just worry we're getting a very large concentration of duplexes in a small area. And again, I'm a big fan of having affordable homes. I think it's needed, but I don't know if it's all needed to be clustered in one area, or would be a concern of mine at least.
So we could approve this R4 with an overlay. I know that doesn't squash your concerns with the duplexes, but
Yeah.
at least we're not.
Do we overlay now or do we overlay at the plat? That's what I was. So I
You-
think you were
you-
saying at the platting process, we would.
It would be, rather than an overlay, we could require a covenant, which would, you could approve it. You could approve it with the condition that the covenant is required as well, and then that would just run with your recommendation to the city council. And then they could ratify that same decision on the 17th, should they wish. And then during the platting process, we would make sure that that covenant was a part of it based on your decision this evening. So basically what I'm saying is you can approve it with conditions. And then the question is, does the covenant, are you requiring a number of single family supposedly on the west side? Or is the covenant to ensure that it is actually two family and they're not gonna have the tri or quadplexes? What is it that you guys are after? And feel free to work through that here. Everyone probably feels a little differently, I'm not sure.
Yeah, could we do a covenant of, could we require a certain percentage of single-family homes? Is that?
Correct.
Yeah.
We can make a recommendation.
Yeah, yeah.
The only thing I would say, I hear what you're saying about concentration of duplexes and stuff. This one feels different though, because one of the things we've also talked about is different types of housing for different people. And so duplex is targeted at a specific age range, feels a little different there. So.
I would agree, and I'm still in the boat that, as a developer, they're in tune with the market and they're gonna build what people
Yeah.
are requesting.
That's right.
I mean, you have the same thing going on, 3 miles south, or excuse me, 3 miles east of Goddard, on the south side of Wichita. They've got duplexes going up like mad, and they're not building them because people don't want them. So I know I'm agreeing, and we have a lot of doors that are still yet to be built, but there must be some demand. And I don't know.
Cool, and I think to your point, this is targeting a different market even with the seniors, specifically, with the clubhouse and different things of that nature. That's a different culture, different setting than what a quote unquote traditional duplex neighborhood would be.
Yeah, but that kind of gets into part of the push, at least as I see it, for affordable housing is more your young families that are starting out. Senior housing is legal discrimination against people younger than 45, younger than 55. So it kind of, to me, it takes out that having senior housing in a duplex kind of cuts the feet out of the whole purpose of what I see as having affordable housing.
The reality is affordable housing today is a duplex.
Yeah, I agree, but
That's
it's
the reality.
it is, but I see affordable housing being in large part for the younger families starting out.
Right now, we're driving out our folks that are getting on in age that are retired and want to downsize. We don't have any place for them to go. So
Yeah.
I see it as an opportunity as well.
Yeah.
We kind of look at it in urban planning as musical chairs. Every time you add a development like this, no matter the type, you're adding a chair so someone else has a place to sit. And the sequencing can be really interesting. My family in particular, we currently live in a 2-family property, a duplex. We're buying a median value home in one of the well-placed neighborhoods in our community. So, and the people that are moving out of that are actually going into a senior facility. So you can kind of see how there's a stair step, and the same thing with our neighbor right next door that's in the other side of our duplex. They just bought a house in the season. So the folks that are living in these, they're the buyers of the single family home, people that are looking to get out of that property and maybe into something bigger, maybe into a senior living facility or what have you. So But we kind of use that musical chairs analogy. Every time you're introducing another development, no matter the land use, you're giving another chair for somebody to sit, another house for somebody to live in your community.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess the question is, do you want to mess with it now, or do you want to talk about it at planning? And see what it looks like before we get too carried away? What would you prefer?
Would it be better to do now, so they would have all that info as they're plating?
I don't know, I guess that's my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, do we want to,
I would
set it
think
now, or do we
I
want to
would
see
think
what
you'd
the?
want to set it now, so you're working with, I could be wrong, I'm not an engineer by any means.
The one challenge I see, and Mr. Price, you can help here, is,
Sure.
I mean, if we're gonna go with a percentage or some type like that, without the lot count, how are we gonna set a goal?
Right. So we could approve the R4 with the ability to write a covenant.
That's what I'm wondering, if we just leave it fairly open-ended and then talk about it.
You could just vocalize that the consensus amongst the planning commission is that when you come here for plating, we likely could require a covenant of you. I mean, that's the beauty in the entitlement process. There's a bunch of opportunities between now and the time they put a stake in the ground for you guys to continue to massage and figure out how you want this to look. So if that's the perspective you have, my recommendation would be that you approve the zoning, tell Mr. Denicky that when you come back for plating, we're likely going to require a covenant, so you guys need to be thinking about that as you are putting the plating for the site together.
Is it okay to ask Joey a question?
Absolutely.
In your discussions with the developer, was it 100% duplexes?
In order for this market to work, that was mentioned with the Bel Air and then also the Maze, is they are trying to, get more people in this area for sure. And for it to work for this type of development, they are asking for that 2-family attached units. They don't have a market right now with a single family. It would disrupt what they're going after, unfortunately. So the Villas product would not be something that could come in at that time.
Right.
So it is kind of, unfortunately, kind of what they're going after. But again, they've looked at this market in other places and they've found this formula. I will say the same thing. It's not the typical duplex community. It's not just geared towards senior living. However, they see the value of not having yard space and not being able to have to take care of things. So, but they don't limit it to just 55 plus. But I will say primarily that is who's coming into these neighborhoods, and that's kind of what is driving them into that neighborhood. So,
Yeah, we have to assume that can change in a conversation one day.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that.
Mhm.
But that's what they're, initially talking
It's
about.
today's market.
yep.
Right. We've had that change before.
Mhm.
So,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Not trying to rush everyone here, but I think we're looking for a motion that spells out what it is we want to do here.
I'll make a motion to approve zone 5-1 as written, the rezoning application in case zone 5-1, excuse me, zone dash 5-1.
I'll make a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
What's the count?
Could we do a roll call, Mr. Chair, just so for the record we had the count correct?
Okay. Mr. Parks? Opposed or for? Is that how we do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think opposed.
Okay. Straight. 4.
Opposed. 4.
Opposed.
4.
Got that?
Jim,
Opposed.
opposed.
Sorry.
Ryan,
You want
4.
4.
and Chris.
Opposed.
Opposed, thank you.
Sorry to put you guys on the spot like that, but it
No, you're good.
helps. I'm not 100% sure what we do in a tie, so I'll go back to the regulations
Oh, there?
and have a look.
Okay.
So thank you guys for your patience as I fill in this evening for your esteemed zoning administrator. So. With that, I think we can move along. You're good with it?
Yep.
Okay. And I'll have Micah report back to you guys on what happens in a tie. So each one of these processes can look a little bit different. So I don't know if it goes to the
I think the
still
city
good.
council
Okay. Okay.
break the tie.
That sounds right, but I want to think. I'll double check.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. You good if I go ahead with item H1?
Yes, please.
All right, this is the preliminary plat for the Willow development. K.E. Miller Engineering, they've submitted the preliminary plat on behalf of the developer for land located on the southeast corner of Maple and 183rd. This is actually an R4 zoning designation, similar bulk regulations issues, which is why this was asked for and then approved several months ago. But although R4, there'll be 33 single-family housing units there. The final plat will be coming up next, and the final plat would obviously be needed to be ratified by the council. So this is an infill project. There's lots of nearby public infrastructure that can be utilized to serve the development, but they still have to pay their fair share. So there's an existing stormwater reserve that was actually oversized in anticipation of this development. I want to say it's the Spring Hill one. It's just to the south of this development. Also, they would have to finance the sewer main extension that would gravity flow to the Elkridge lift station. That would not be required because that lift station was built to capacity to receive just these 33 single-family lots. So they would just be covering the cost to extend the sewer main to it. Also, they will, as mentioned earlier, have to share in the cost of the 12-inch water main extension and looping. The Planning Commission is considering approving the preliminary plat. Again, 33 lots, R4 zoning. Intention is for single-family detached on 8+ acres. That averages about 4.1 units per acre. Here's a look at the preliminary plat. You would have the full version in your agenda packet. No financial considerations. Legal has approved this as to its current form, and here's staff's recommendation. Any questions? And I think we have a representative with K.E. Miller here tonight.
So it says to approve based on the stormwater plan. So who, does that just get looked after the city, or how does that get worked through? Or
So the developer's engineer will put together the stormwater plan, and then it has to be approved. It's reviewed by our city engineer who has to approve it. So
okay.
2 sets of eyes.
So the basic intent is the storm from here flows into the retention pond. for detention bond?
I believe so, and kind of the rule of thumb is the property, you know, the adjacent property, including the one that's being developed, it can't negatively impact, and in fact, most of the time improves the nearby stormwater situation, as you guys know. And for the guys that have been sitting on here for a while, it's pretty standard practice for you guys to approve these plats contingent upon the final engineering review. And typically, we won't bring the final plat to the city council until that review has been made and then approved by the city engineer. So.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I was gonna let anybody else go, I didn't want to take up all the time, but, so, looks like there's parking spots by lots 6, 7, and 13. Is that what I think it is? Or what would be the purpose of those? Is it a clubhouse or something, or?
Come up there. Yeah, please.
Good evening, Michael Edwards, agent for the applicant, Katie Miller Engineering. Those are parking spaces just for extra to avoid off-street parking for guests of people who are staying there. There's not really any plans for a clubhouse or anything with it. Just a utilizing space so that people wouldn't park and congest the street.
Okay.
If they have guests.
With the higher density R4 zoning, the setbacks are a little lesser, so it can be seen that there's going to be more vehicles kind of clogging up the streets, which is why the developer wanted to have some spaces for off-street parking too. You're putting more houses in a smaller space, there's going to be more vehicles on these roads, shorter driveways because the setbacks are lesser than a typical R1 development. So this kind of helps accommodate putting those cars in somewhere other than the street.
Yeah.
So 2 vehicles can get by without having to wait for the other one to come because there's cars parked on both sides of the road all over the place.
What, will there be covenants or anything that would stop somebody from just parking a car there more or less permanently, like their extra vehicle, or?
It would be owned by the reserve. It's in a reserve, and so it would be maintained by, I think they're setting up an HOA or a community fund, and so it's private, so they could put up signs that said limited to guests of the development.
You have Sergeant Roney here who can tell me if I'm lying, but if your vehicle is registered and tagged and up to date and it doesn't look like it's in disrepair, it can be parked there as long as it wants to be. But if it's a junk motor vehicle, not tagged, not registered, that kind of thing, they can't park their, the car they work on in their spare time in one of these spaces and just leave it there. Again, unless it's in good repair and it's tagged and registered.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from up here?
So this property is currently R4?
Yes.
And the detention, all that is part of the neighborhood to the south.
To the south. So this was originally already previously platted as a commercial addition.
Right.
And so that had already passed through, and we've submitted the drainage plan to Harlan, and he's reviewing it right now. We just haven't heard back from him. I think it's still in the review process. But there was already a drainage plan tied with that previous planning.
Yes.
In the whole Spring Hill addition, so the detention would be achieved within the detention pond to the south.
Will there be any screening to the east or the south against Spring Hill, or how does that work?
To the east and south, I believe there would I don't think there's any screening requirements. I think there's existing fencing there.
Yeah, there's already existing screening. We don't usually require more.
Okay.
And even though this is R4, it's a higher density, it's still single family homes. So
Yeah.
it's not like you have some kind of conflict with 2 way different housing types next to each other. To the east, I can't speak to that. I'm having a hard time visualizing it, but I'm not sure that it would be required there either. There was an initial conversation about some verbiage around the right of ways, but it just got tossed right in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve preliminary plat for Willows Ridge Development contingent upon final review of the engineering plan for stormwater.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
All right, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission, very similar item here. We're just gonna go to the final plat. So pretty much all the same information. So I'm gonna skip all the way to the end unless you have additional questions. And just a reminder, this would have to be ratified by the City Council. We'll have it on the March 17th agenda should you approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve the final plat for the Willows Ridge Development contingent upon final review of the engineering plan for stormwater.
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
All right. My colleague Micah put together the following staff report. This is just a few updates on some of the infrastructure work going on for the previously approved developments. We've got the 167th project. They'll be starting paving in June or July, and then we'll see some permits coming soon thereafter. 70 lots over there, 23rd South, similar situation. We got 84 lots over there, Arbor Creek South. The phase 1 is 46 lots. And then Rustic Creek, they're working through another phase, and it'll be 27 lots there. So you put together this highly fancy map. You can see up here, this is 23rd and 167th, these two, as well as down here, you've got, I want to say that one's actually 23rd Street. Up here's 167th. Down here is phase 1 of Arbor Creek South. And then up here is the currently under construction phase of Rustic Creek. That's all I got, guys.
I would like to make kind of one comment on our, I don't remember, was it here? On the northeast corner. You know, I think a jump from an R1 to an R4 is pretty night and day. This is a large area, and I would have faith that MKC we could jump it to an R2. They could do their design in a way that sort of minimizes the paperwork on variance stuff for the city. So I wanted to make that clear. That is the intention in my mind, that it would go to an R2, and you could kind of work in the parameters of that, and not overtax the city with a bunch of paperwork. So I just think jumping to an R4 for that, knowing what's to the west of it, is kind of an open, a little more sparse neighborhood of larger homes, and to be across the street, something that could be incredibly dense. And I know everybody's going to say, well, we've got an R4 across the street. Well, that was, and from what I know, that was an R4, and it's been designed. That was not hidden from anybody. That was always going to be an R4. It could be an apartment complex on that corner, and so we were sort of anticipating that. I just think the jump from an R1 to an R4 is pretty drastic, so.
I don't disagree, and we were accepting of that.
Okay.
Again, we were just kind of directed, saying the process to do what we're needing. We'd be accepting to a covenant, if we needed to restrict it to that. Whatever is easier, we can work it out with Micah. If we can, I think our client wouldn't be opposed to.
And I think that was the other thing I was
Yeah.
thinking is you guys were just told this was the easiest way to go so that we could move things through a little bit faster. And I think we all appreciate that because that's kind of how our world works. Everything's getting a little faster and faster. But I think it could be, I think we could move to an R2 and get this accomplished without, too much red tape.
At the unknown.
Yeah, without the unknown.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
An
appreciate
R4 is
that.
pretty drastic.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. Parks and the city council, they'll take this up on the 17th. We could tell these guys to bring the covenant with them when they come to that meeting. So it's possible that assuming that that's what happens when there's a tie, and it's possible that on the 17th, they adopt it as is with the covenant. And I'll communicate to them what your concerns were.
Sure. Appreciate it.
Whoever else has concerns, similar or otherwise.
Yeah. I don't think any of us want to stop development. We don't want to really slow things down. We're not trying to make it a pain. It's just that drastic of a bump. It's hard to take in one meeting. I mean, that's, there's a lot that goes into that. So.
I just appreciate the discussion.
Yeah, it's great. A lot of fun.
Anybody down here?
Yeah, I think personally I'd rather see it stay R1 would be my preference. But yeah, I appreciate the discussion too. It was nice to actually have we had a pretty in-depth discussion on it. I think all kind of got our feelings across.
That's very much appreciated. If that's it, I believe I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion later.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you all very much.